Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. It's your family doctor, CD, just your primary care physician who's been in practice for over a decade. CD, and I'm so glad you're here. Have you noticed lately that it seems like everyone around you is coughing, sneezing, or dealing with some kind of stomach bug? Or maybe you felt it yourself. Suddenly the weather shifts just a little bit cooler and suddenly your stomach feels heavy, bloated, or you're dealing with acid reflux and constant burping. These little annoyances, they're actually your body's way of sending you a gentle memo. Hey, it's time to take care of me. So today, I want to talk about a very special spice, and I say special because it's one of those things most people think they know suai, but they really don't. You've probably smelled it in stews or braised meat dishes. You might even have it in your spice rack right now. But what you probably don't know is just how highly regarded it is in traditional medicine. It's one of the most underrated treasures out there, and that spice is cloves. Now, I know what you're thinking, Sunny cloves, the thing I throw in my slow cooker, and honestly, using it just for that is like using a Ferrari to go get groceries. It's a total waste in traditional medicine. Cloves have been a big deal for thousands of years. In fact, going all the way back to the Han Dynasty, they had a much more elegant name for it, Temdi. They called it chicken tongue spice back then. High-ranking officials who had to report directly to the Emperor Sovereign, basically the ancient equivalent of a White House chief of staff or senior advisor Sovereign, had to chew on cloves before their meetings. Why? Because there were no toothbrushes or mouthwash back then. And if you had bad breath while briefing the emperor, that wasn't just embarrassing sadi, that could be a career-ending move, if you know what I mean. So it became a rule. If you were speaking to the emperor, you had to hold a clove in your mouth as a sign of respect. But here's the thing, Semdi, the ancients weren't just worried about fresh breath. They were brilliant at connecting the dots. They noticed that people who chewed cloves didn't just have better breath chew, they also had fewer stomach issues, less acid reflux, less bloating, and even some of those pale, frail scholars with cold hands and feet, the ones who always looked worn out and exhausted subi after using cloves regularly, they started to look healthier, more color in their cheeks, more energy, better overall vitality. So what was really going on there? In traditional medicine, there's one core concept that matters more than anything else. It's called yang qi, your vital energy, your inner warmth. There's an ancient text, the Yellow Emperor's classic of medicine, that says this: yang qi is like the sun in the sky. If it loses its place, your life will be shortened. Think about that for a second. What would happen if the sun just went out? Eternal winter. Everything freezes, nothing grows. Your body works the exact same way. A lot of people see inflammation and immediately think too much heat, too much. They pop anti-inflammatories, they take antibiotics, they do everything to cool things down. But from a deeper perspective, a lot of those problems don't start with heat, they start with cold. With the body not being warm enough at its core, think about our modern lifestyle. Summer is supposed to be the time when your body naturally pushes out cold and toxins through sweat. Thubant, it's actually your body's best chance to release deep-seated cold. But what do? We sit in air conditioning all day, shutting our pores tight, trapping that cold deep in our bones. And when we're thirsty, instead of warm water to support our organs, we guzzle ice-cold sodas, iced coffees, large frappuccinos, cold beer, sous you name it. That's like throwing a bucket of ice water on a blazing fire. Sous your digestive system just shuts down, and that's when the problems start. Then we take medications, many of which are considered cold in nature in traditional terms, sebai, things like certain antibiotics or pain relievers, sevati, and that just adds more ice to the system. So what happens when your body gets cold? Imagine winter, rivers freeze, ground gets hard, your body is the same way. When blood meets cold, it congeals, circulation slows down, and that can lead to stagnation, which is often a precursor to cardiovascular issues down the road. When fluids meet cold, they turn into phlegm or dampness, which can form cysts or nodules over time. When tissues don't get enough warm blood flow and nourishment, they start to break down. Modern medicine gives all these conditions different names: gastritis, colitis, diabetes, high blood pressure, even cancer. But in traditional medicine, they all share one common root: thuvi, not enough warmth, too much internal cold. That's the unifying theme. And cloves. Cloves are like a wildfire in a bottle, subi, in the best possible way. They're pungent and warm. Subi, the pungency helps move things along, gets circulation going, and the warmth helps melt the cold. When you take cloves, it's like lighting a little sun inside a body that's been cold and damp for years, subi, maybe even decades. And when that sun comes out, the ice melts, the fog lifts, and the things that thrive in darkness and dampness, survey, they just can't survive anymore. That's the beautiful, elegant logic of traditional medicine. It's simple, but it's deep, and it makes a lot of sense when you think about it. Now, let me break down how this actually works in your body, and I promise no confusing medical jargon that'll make your head spin. I like to use analogies that make sense to everyday life. So picture your body like a kitchen, your stomach and spleen, Effie, that's your cooking pot. Everything you eat and drink goes into that pot to be processed. And your kidney sivri, that's the fire under the pot. In traditional medicine, that's called your Mingmen fire sid, your life gate fire, the deepest source of warmth in your body. So how do you stay healthy? The fire under the pot has to be strong enough to heat the pot properly. When the pot is hot, it can cook the food, break it down, and turn it into the nutrients and energy your body needs sabui. That process is called chi transformation. It's the conversion of food into usable fuel. A lot of modern medicine focuses purely on chemical components and what's under a microscope, sudi, which is important. Don't get me wrong, sudi, but it sometimes misses the bigger picture. Because if that fire goes out, shudi, if the pot gets cold sudi, then even the most expensive supplements in the world are just raw. Uncooked ingredients sitting there, your body can't use them effectively. Now, in the world of traditional medicine, most warming herbs focus on one specific area. Some work on the upper body Suwon, like cinnamon twig, which mainly affects the heart and lungs. Others work on the lower body Siwon, like aconite, which targets kidney yang pretty specifically, but cloves are a multitasker. They work on multiple levels, and that's what makes them so special. First, cloves go to the kidneys. They add fuel to that Mingmen fire. When your kidney fire is strong, your lower body starts to warm up suchi, and that's huge for a lot of common issues. Fatigue in men, menstrual discomfort in women, and frequent nighttime urination in older adults, D, the kind that keeps you up at night. Second, cloves go to the stomach and spleen. They warm the middle and fuddy, and this is the key part, so listen up, Sadi. They send things down. Normally, your stomach chi should flow downward. Food goes in, gets digested, and moves down through the system. But when your stomach is too cold, that chi gets rebellious. It moves up instead of down. That's what causes burping, hiccups, acid reflux, heartburn, and nausea. Modern medicine calls this GERD, subgastroesophageal reflux disease, and the typical treatment, acid blockers, things like omeprazole or other PPIs, which can help temporarily, but they don't fix the root cause. They just reduce the acid without addressing why the acid is going the wrong way in the first place. Cloves, on the other hand, are warm and have a calming downward pulling effect. They're like a warm, firm hand that gently pushes that rebellious stomach chi back where it belongs. And as they warm things up, the cold dissipates, the stomach relaxes, the sphincter works better, and the symptoms start to fade. Now, you've probably heard of that stomach bacteria, Psoriasis H. pylori. It's very common, and when people test positive for it, they often get a course of multiple antibiotics, sending what they call triple therapy or quadruple therapy. And what happens? A lot of patients end up with even worse stomach issues, suddenly more bloating, less appetite, sometimes diarrhea or nausea from the antibiotics themselves. And then a few months later, they go back for a retest and the bacteria is back. Think about it. Tea flies don't land on a clean window. They land on cracked, rotten eggs. Mold doesn't grow on a dry sunlit wall. It grows on damp, dark, poorly ventilated corners. The same is true in your body. When your stomach has been battered by years of cold drinks, processed foods, stress, and even some medications, it becomes a damp, cold environment, and that's exactly what bad bacteria love. Antibiotics kill the bacteria, but the environment stays the same. So it comes back. Cloves work differently, Sendidi. They're like a powerful dehumidifier and a little sun rolled into one. They evaporate the dampness, drive out the cold, and turn that cold, wet environment into a warm, dry one. The bacteria can't survive their sundi, so they either leave on their own or they're neutralized. That's the beauty of it. We're treating the terrain, not just the enemy. It's a completely different, more holistic approach, 7T, and in many cases, it's more sustainable. Now, let's get a little deeper, T1, because I want to share a perspective that might challenge what you think you know about chronic disease. A lot of people believe traditional medicine is only good for chronic. Minor issues, PsyD, and that for serious stuff like diabetes, cancer, or autoimmune conditions, you need modern medicine exclusively. But let me use cloves to show you a different way of thinking because this really matters. Take diabetes. Modern medicine says it's about insulin and high blood sugar, so treatment focuses on lowering blood sugar with medications, insulin, and diet modification. And those are all important tools, no question. But from another angle, diabetes is also about failing qi transformation and coldness in the lower body. Let's go back to that pot and fire analogy. If the fire under the pot isn't hot enough, the water won't boil. What happens then? It stays cold. Your body can't use that cold water. Sui, it just passes right through, which is why you urinate more often, chuai. That's the frequent urination that many diabetics experience. Because the water isn't turning into steam and rising to moisturize your mouth and cells, you feel constantly thirsty, Tindy, no matter how much you drink. You're still dry because the food isn't being properly cooked and broken down into absorbable nutrients. Those nutrients get flushed out, Shidi, that's the sugar in your urine that doctors test for. And because your body isn't absorbing those nutrients effectively, you feel hungry all the time. Even as you lose weight, if we only focus on lowering blood sugar without fixing the fire and the pot, we're not solving the root problem. We're managing a symptom. Cloves, with their warming nature, are like adding logs to that fire. When the fire is strong, the water boils, qi transformation works again, steam rises, you're not thirsty anymore. Nutrients are properly absorbed, there's no sugar spilling into the urine, and your hands and feet warm up because circulation improves. That's treating the root. And interestingly, modern research has also found that certain active compounds in cloves can have beneficial effects on metabolism and insulin sensitivity, but from the traditional perspective, those benefits are just one expression of a much larger restoration of balance. Let's talk about another very common problem. I see so many middle-aged and older patients who've dealt with stomach issues for decades, sometimes 30 or 40 years. They eat something even slightly hard, sudden pain, something cold, sudden diarrhea or cramping. Brush their teeth in the morning, and nausea and gagging. They get an endoscopy, and the gastroenterologist tells them they have chronic superficial gastritis, atrophic gastritis, even intestinal metaplasia, SUIN, and that sounds terrifying, right? It sounds like a one-way street to something worse, but often the core issue isn't that complicated. It's simply what traditional medicine calls cold congealed in the stomach wall after years of cold accumulation from diet, lifestyle, and medications, doesn't get enough blood flow, and it starts to atrophy and weaken, especially if your stomach pain gets worse in winter. Or when it's rainy and damp and gets better with a heating pad or a warm compressed one. That's a big clue. That tells me cold is a major player. Cloves' warming nature can slowly drill through that cold, break it apart over time, and help your body expel its swun, often through burping or gas, when you feel that rumbling in your belly. That wave of warmth spreading outward, that's cloves helping your body do a deep clean from the inside out. Now, I know this is a big topic, and when it comes to more serious conditions like tumors or cancer, modern medicine talks about gene mutations and uncontrolled cell proliferation, and that's accurate at one level. But from another perspective, some of these conditions can be understood as what traditional medicine calls yin excess accumulation. What does that mean? Think about it. Subai water at room temperature is liquid, but if you keep it in a freezing environment, it becomes ice. The fluids and blood in your body, if they don't get enough warmth and movement, can slowly congeal over time. First, it might be dampness and cold suvi, then it becomes phlegm and stagnant fluid sui, and eventually it can form into more solid masses. That's why many patients with these conditions often have cold hands and feet, and their bodies feel cool to the touch. To address that, instead of only using aggressive interventions, savi, which are sometimes absolutely necessary, I'm not saying they aren't. Sevi, you can also think about warming the body from within to create an environment where those accumulations are less likely to form or progress. Cloves aren't the strongest herb for this purpose, but they're an excellent everyday tool for maintaining warmth. Especially for the digestive tract, many digestive tract issues, including some cancers, develop from long-term cold and stagnation in the stomach and intestines. By using cloves regularly, even in small amounts, you keep that middle burner warm, you keep blood and fluids moving, and you create an internal environment where unhealthy things simply don't have a chance to settle down and take root. It's like keeping a stream flowing. Sun in flowing water doesn't stagnate, and it doesn't breed problems. All right, we've covered a lot of theory. Now let's talk about what's really on your mind, how to pick good cloves and how to use them effectively in your daily life, because this is the part that actually changes things. First, when you go to a spice shop or an herbal store, Sivanti, or even online Trivi, you'll see different types of cloves. What you want are male cloves, the flower buds that haven't bloomed yet. Female cloves are the fruits, and they're much weaker in terms of active compounds. When you're picking them, here's my 3-step quality test. Definitely teach this to all my patients who want to use cloves. Step 1, look at the color and size. Choose cloves that are plump, fairly large, reddish brown, and feel solid and heavy for their size. If they look black, shriveled, and dry swine, that's old stock that's been sitting on the shelf for years. The active oils have evaporated, just put it back and move on. Step 2, swine the fingernail test. This is the most important one, so don't skip it. Take a single clove and press your fingernail firmly into the thickest part, the bud head. If you see a little oil seep out, chew like a tiny glistening drop shooty, and you immediately smell that strong, warm, spicy aroma, that's top quality. That oil is the heart of its power, seaweed. It contains the active compounds that make cloves so effective. If it's dry and hard and nothing comes out when you press, or if there's barely any smell, that's basically wood. Don't waste your money on it. Step 3, the water test. Drop a clove in a glass of warm water. With high oil content and density, will either float vertically like a little submarine standing on NTY, or sink right to the bottom. If it floats sideways like a dead fish on the surface, that means the essential oils have dissipated and it's lost its potency. That's a secondary or inferior product. All right, you've got your good cloves. Now here are 3 practical, easy ways to use them subund for different needs and different people. Try what works for you. These are the recipes I share with my patients all the time. Recipe 1, clove and ginger tea. This is for chronic cold stomach, acid reflux. Poor appetite side, and it's great for daily maintenance and support. Who it's for: you eat something cold and your stomach hurts, you feel nauseous brushing your teeth in the morning, your stomach gurgles a lot with loud noises, your stools are loose or poorly formed, your face looks pale or dull. You just don't have much appetite. What you need: 3 to 5 male cloves and 5 slices of fresh ginger sabi, and keep the skin on the ginger. In traditional medicine, the skin helps move circulation to the surface while the flesh warms the middle fuddy. Together they work more completely. It's a small detail that makes a real difference. How to do it: lightly crack the cloves with the back of a knife or a pestle sun, just enough to release the oils, not grind them to powder. Put the cracked cloves and the ginger slices in a thermos or a mug with a lid. Pour in freshly boiled water, boiling hot, not just warm. Close the lid and let it steep for 15 to 20 minutes. This is crucial. Steeping is what fully releases the active compounds. If you just dip it and drink it right away, you won't get the full benefit. What you'll feel: a distinct, noticeable warmth that travels from your mouth all the way down to your stomach and then spreads outward through your abdomen. If you burp or pass gas after drinking it, that's a good sign your body is releasing trapped cold and pressure. Don't be embarrassed. Tune it's your body working the way it should. Recipe 2. Clove sucking method. This is a natural social secret weapon, Savi, and it also helps with throat comfort and overall oral hygiene. Who it's for: people dealing with bad breath, or especially if it seems to come from deep in the stomach rather than just the mouth. Chronic throat discomfort, or that annoying feeling of something stuck in your throat, frequent canker sores or mouth ulcers, or anyone who wants a natural breath freshener without the artificial chemicals. How to do it: take 1 or 2 male cloves and put them in your mouth. Don't chew. Just let them sit there between your cheek and gum or under your tongue. Let your saliva slowly soak them. The oils will release gradually over time, a slow, steady drip. You might feel a slight numbness on your tongue or a mild warming or tingling sensation in your throat. That's perfectly normal. It means the compounds are actively working. Keep it in for about 30 minutes until the taste starts to fade significantly. Then you can spit it out. Or you can chew and swallow it if you prefer. It's perfectly safe to swallow. Recipe 3, clove external warmth patch. This is for joint and muscle aches, arthritis type pains, and also for menstrual cramps in women. Who it's for: older adults whose knees or other joints ache when the weather turns cold and damp shivery. And you know who you are. You're the human barometer. Women dealing with significant period pain that improves with heat. People with chronic lower back pain that gets worse in cold weather. What you need: clove powder. You can grind whole cloves yourself in a clean coffee grinder or spice grinder and a high proof alcohol at least 100 proof, like a good quality vodka or white liquor. How to do it: mix the clove powder with some warm alcohol to make a thick spreadable paste. Spread it evenly on a piece of gauze or a thin cloth and apply it to the painful joint like the knee, elbow, or wrist or for women, on the lower belly, about an inch or so below the belly button. Cover it with a bandage or tape to keep it in place and leave it on for 2 to 4 hours. How it works: cloves have a strong penetrating quality that can go deep, and the alcohol helps move blood and qi and carries the active compounds into the tissues. It's like a deep, warm acupuncture treatment without the needles. It can get into those deep, cold, damp spaces that regular heat packs can't reach. Sometimes you'll notice the skin feels a little damp or moist when you take the patch off 40. That's your body pulling out excess dampness. It's a very good sign. Now, I know we've talked about a lot of theory and some practical recipes, but I also know that some people are still skeptical. That's fair. Sudi, I'm a doctor. I believe in evidence, and I don't expect anyone to take my word for it blindly. So let me share a few real stories from my practice, Sudi, because for me, the proof is in the people. These are real patients, real outcomes, and they illustrate what I am talking about better than any textbook could. Case 1. A diabetic man facing amputation. A 62-year-old gentleman suver, let's call him Mr. Wang Su, came to see me in a wheelchair. Had diabetes for 18 years, and it had been poorly controlled despite multiple medications. He couldn't even put his left foot on the ground because the pain was so severe, so just touching the floor was agony. When he took off his sock and showed me his foot shoe, and I have to be honest with you, sucky, even from across the room, I could smell dead, necrotic tissue. That's a smell you never forget. His left big toe was completely black, dry, and shriveled, some classic gangrene, subby, and there was fluid oozing from the margins. The hospital had diagnosed him with diabetic foot gangrene and told him bluntly that he needed immediate amputation to on at least half of his foot, probably more. To stop the infection from spreading, he was in tears in my office. He said, and I remember this clearly, "Doc, I don't want to be disabled at this stage of my life. I'd rather take my chances." Now, I checked his pulse 7, his radial pulse was weak, but more importantly, his kidney pulse was almost non-existent. That's a clear traditional sign that his kidney yangshu and his deepest source of warmth thidi was critically low, and when I touched his legs from the knees down, they were ice cold, not cool sati, ice cold. The circulation just wasn't getting down there. This wasn't just high blood sugar, this was his lower body turning into a freezer, and no blood or nutrients could reach that toe. So along with some internal warming herbs that I prescribed specifically for him, I gave him 2 very simple instructions: get 1 pound of cloves and 1 pound of cinnamon every single day. Boil 10 grams of cloves and 10 grams of cinnamon in a large pot of water. He would drink a cup of that tea 3 times a day, not too hot, just warm suvi, and also use the same water to soak his foot at a comfortably warm temperature for about 20 minutes each evening. Not scalding suvi, just warm enough to feel soothing. After the first week, he called me and said he felt a tingling, prickling sensation in his toe for the first time in months. And I told him, "Suvi, that's a great sign. Pain and tingling mean nerves are waking up, blood is trying to get through. It's when you feel absolutely nothing that you're in real trouble. Sudi, that's when tissue is truly dead." After a month, the black color started to fade from the edges, and new pink granulation tissue was forming underneath. After 3 months, he walked into my office on his own, 2 feet, shivered, no wheelchair, no cane. He went back to his endocrinologist and surgeon for a follow-up, and his blood sugar numbers were actually better than when he was on high-dose insulin. His surgeon was stunned. He asked, "What did you do? What kind of experimental treatment is this?" And Mr. Wang just smiled and said, "I just used some spices from my kitchen. That's not magic, Timby. That's the power of improving circulation and warming the body from the inside out." Case 2, a 20-year struggle with stomach disease that was labeled precancerous. A woman in her early 50s, Simbai, let's call her Mrs. Li Su, came to me with a diagnosis of atrophic gastritis with severe intestinal metaplasia. In modern medicine, that's considered a precancerous condition. Further, it puts you at significantly higher risk for gastric cancer down the road. She was terrified. And I don't blame her. Someday hearing that word is frightening. She told me she'd been suffering with stomach issues for almost 20 years. She couldn't eat anything cold or spicy thundi. Even a small amount would trigger pain. She couldn't eat a full meal Sunday if she ate just a little too much. Her stomach would bloat and feel like a rock was stuck in her chest. At night, she had to prop herself up with 3 or 4 pillows just to sleep, because otherwise acid would surge up into her throat and wake her up coughing and choking. Her nightstand was cluttered with bottles of different antacids, PPIs, and various over-the-counter remedies. She said, "Fundity," and this broke my heart, "Troon, I think I've taken more pills over the years than I've eaten food, and none of them have made me better. I'm just getting worse." I looked at her tongue su in traditional diagnosis. The tongue is like a window into the digestive system. Her tongue coating was thick, white, and greasy suvi, not a healthy, thin white coat, but a heavy, damp looking layer. Her tongue body was swollen and pale, with clear teeth marks indented on the sides, classic signs of what we call spleen qi deficiency and cold dampness in the stomach. Her stomach wasn't a hot cooking pot fought in, it was like a cold, waterlogged bag. And the medications she'd been taking for years, many of them from a traditional perspective, are considered cooling or cold in nature suen, so they were actually making the underlying cold worse. They suppressed the acid but deepened the root imbalance. I asked her if she was willing to try a different approach. I told her to slowly sued, and I mean slowly, with her doctor's supervision taper off those acid blockers and instead try this simple combination: 5 cloves, 1 slice of dried tangerine peel you can find in any Asian grocery store sui, and 3 slices of fresh ginger. Boil them together in water and drink that as a tea twice a day. The total cost maybe 50 cents a day. If that 3 days later she called me and she sounded different, Chundi, there was energy in her voice that I hadn't heard before. She said she'd spent an entire afternoon burping 40, but it wasn't normal burping. It was deep, sour, stale burps that she described as releasing decades of trapped gas. She said it was a little embarrassing, but after it was over, her stomach felt incredibly light, city lighter than it had felt in 20 years. She said it felt like she'd been carrying a weight and it had finally been lifted. She kept that tea up consistently for 2 months. She went back for a follow-up endoscopy, and her gastroenterologist was genuinely amazed. He asked her, "What happened?" "The intestinal metaplasia is significantly reduced, fuddy, almost gone suvity, and your stomach lining looks healthy and pink again." The body's self-repair system had been reawakened. When the cold clears and blood flows properly, the body knows exactly how to fix itself. We don't have to do all the work some by, we just have to create the right environment. Case 3, the human barometer with crippling arthritis. An elderly lady in her late 77. She was what my staff affectionately called our human barometer. Every single time the weather turned cold or rainy, her knee pain would flare up with uncanny accuracy. She was more reliable than the weather forecast on TV over the years. Her finger joints had also swollen and deformed significantly, Sundi classic rheumatoid arthritis changes. She was on painkillers and steroids, which made her face puffy and round sundi, that Cushing's appearance you see with long-term steroid use soon, but her bones were getting more brittle and her joints weren't improving. She was in a lot of pain and had pretty much accepted that this was just how her life was going to be. I didn't prescribe anything expensive or exotic. I just gave her the clove patch recipe I just shared with you. Clove powder mixed with warm alcohol, applied to her knees every evening before bed. She said that within 30 minutes of applying the patch, it felt like thousands of tiny warm needles were gently penetrating deep into her knee joint. The heat just kept going deeper and deeper, not just on the surface. When she took the patch off in the morning, the gauze was often damp to the touch. Her body was pulling out excess moisture and inflammatory fluid. She did this faithfully every night for the entire winter, through the cold months, through the rainy season. By the following spring, when the damp season came around again, she came in to see me with tears in her eyes, heavy tears. She said, "My knees barely hurt at all now. I can walk to the grocery store and back. I can play with my grandkids." The cloves had slowly, steadily pushed out years of cold and dampness trapped in her joints. It wasn't overnight sudi, it took months sudi, but it worked. These aren't miracles, they're not magic, they're everyday stories that remind us of one very important truth when it comes to your health. Direction matters more than effort. If you're heading in the right direction, even simple, humble tools like kitchen spices can create profound change. But if you're heading the wrong way, even the most expensive cutting-edge treatments will struggle to keep up. Now, I want to be absolutely clear about something, Tinvai, because I'm a doctor and my first priority is always safety. I am a big fan of cloves. But I never recommend using anything blindly. Traditional medicine is all about matching the remedy to the person. Cloves are powerful Thai D. They are like a concentrated dose of warmth Thai D, and like anything powerful, they come with rules and precautions. Please pay close attention to these because they matter. Rule number 1, Su Y, and this is the most important one, Su Y. If you have a hot or dry constitution, stay away from cloves. How do you know? Take a look at your tongue in the mirror right now. If your tongue is red fur, not a healthy pink, but a bright strawberry red Su Y with a yellow coating, or worse, if it's completely bare and shiny like a mirror, that's called a mirror tongue, and it's a clear warning sign. Also ask yourself these questions. Are you always thirsty no matter how much water you drink? And does ice water appeal to you more than warm drinks? Do your palms and the soles of your feet often feel hot? So you stick your feet out from under the covers at night or prefer cold floors? Do you have night sweats, sudden waking up with your pajamas damp even though the room isn't hot? Is your stool hard, dry, and difficult to pass stubborn-like? Little pellets, are you easily irritable, short-tempered, or prone to nosebleeds? If you answered yes to several of these, your body is already running hot and dry. Cloves are like pouring gasoline on a fire. They're warming and drying stubby, and they will make you more uncomfortable. This is not the right herb for you. People with this type of body generally need cooling. Moistening herbs Thendi, things like American ginseng or other yin nourishing herbs Sendi, not spicy, warming ones like cloves. Rule number 2, Fendi, if you're taking other herbal medicines, check carefully for interactions. There's an old saying in traditional medicine, cloves and turmeric must never meet. There's a specific herb called turmeric sooty, not the curry spice turmeric, but a different herb called curcuma aromatica, or something similar in Chinese medicine to one that's very effective for moving qi, relieving stagnation, and cooling blood, but it's a natural antagonist to cloves. If you take them together, they can interact in ways that cause unpleasant or even potentially serious side effects, things like nausea, headache, or digestive distress. So if you're seeing an acupuncturist or an herbalist, or if you're taking any other traditional formulas, ask point blank, does my formula contain turmeric? If it does, don't use cloves at the same time. Space them out or skip them altogether. That's not a small detail, sir, real safety concern. Rule number 3, Fundy, pregnant women and infants should be extra cautious. If you're pregnant, your body is in a very special and delicate state. What it needs most is stability and calm. Cloves are pungent and active sevedi. They have strong qi moving and blood moving properties. That energetic movement could potentially disturb the pregnancy or affect the developing baby. So to be on the safe side, TT, and I mean very safe, T-pregnant women should avoid cloves, except under the direct supervision of a qualified practitioner who knows what they're doing. And for infants and very young children, kids are naturally warm savvy. They're often described in traditional medicine as pure yang bodies. Their systems are already warm and active. Unless a child has a clear case of cold too, like sudden watery diarrhea from catching a chill su, their delicate digestive systems are usually not ready for strong warming herbs like cloves. So please keep cloves away from the little ones unless you're specifically guided otherwise by a pediatrician or an experienced practitioner. And finally, Sendi, and this is really important, Sendi more is not better. I can't emphasize this enough. Cloves contain active essential oils, and in large doses, those oils can be irritating to the stomach lining or even cause other issues. For daily maintenance, I recommend no more than 3 to 5 grams total per day. To give you a sense of that, it's about 30 to 50 individual cloves. That's a lot more than it sounds. Subai, you're not going to eat that many in a day. 1 or 2 cloves in your tea, 1 held in your mouth. That's already a good amount. Don't think, well, if a little is good, a lot must be great. That's not how herbal medicine works. That's like thinking if 1 glass of wine is relaxing, a whole bottle must be even more relaxing savai. It just doesn't work that way. The goal is balance. In health, as in life, the middle path is the wisest path. Moderation always wins, and here's something I want to say directly to everyone watching Sabashi, my middle-aged and older friends. And even the younger ones who are burning the candle at both ends, working long hours, surviving on coffee and takeout, and thinking their bodies will just bounce back forever. What are we really working for? Think about it. When we're young, we trade our health for wealth. We think we're invincible sun. We can pull all-nighters, eat whatever we want, skip exercise. And it doesn't seem to matter. Then, as we get older, we try desperately to trade our wealth back for health sever, only to discover that a hospital bed might just be the most expensive bed in the entire world. And the saddest part, after a lifetime of hard work, late nights, and sacrifice severy the retirement money we saved, not for travel, not for our grandchildren's college fund, not for the things we love, Sunday ends up going to hospital bills, to tubes and IV lines and chemotherapy and radiation and painful procedures. And sometimes, despite everything modern medicine can throw at it, we still leave this world in pain or in a haze of medications. That's not really living, that's just surviving Sunday, and barely true. Wellness isn't about the most expensive supplements from the health food store, the fanciest organic foods shipped from across the world, or the private hospital room with a view. True wellness is simple. It's about aligning with nature. with the rhythms your body was actually built for over thousands of years of evolution. Your body is an incredible self-repairing machine front, but it needs the right conditions, and nature provides exactly what we need, often in the most humble packages. This tiny little clove sundae, it's literally packed with the warmest, purest energy from the sun and the earth. It's a gift that's been sitting in our spice racks all along. It's cheap, it's accessible to almost everyone, and honestly, that's exactly why it's not heavily promoted by the big health industries, because you can't patent a clove. No one can make $1 billion off a kitchen spice, and frankly, that's a shame, son, but it also means we can take advantage of it without breaking the bank. As someone who believes in empowering people with practical, affordable tools for better health, I feel a real responsibility to share what actually works stunt, not what sells the most bottles or has the flashiest marketing. So here's my invitation to you, and I mean this from the heart. Start small, just one or two small changes. Swap that iced drink for some warm water or warm tea. For that alone can be huge for your digestion over time. Take a break from all those fancy, overpriced supplements that promise the world but deliver very little, and use that money to buy real whole foods instead. Sunday fresh vegetables, good protein, simple ingredients, eat well, sleep well. Those two things honestly are more powerful than any pill. And maybe pick up some good quality cloves from your local spice shop or grocery store and keep them in your kitchen when your stomach feels cold and heavy after a meal. Brew a cup of clove and ginger tea. When your throat feels off or you need a little confidence boost before a meeting or a date, just hold one clove in your mouth, even if it's just a few minutes a day, a few pennies a day, It's an investment in your body's inner sun, and that sun is what keeps everything running. There's an ancient saying that I absolutely love. When righteous chi is stored on the inside, evil cannot enter. It simply means sati. When your body is full of warmth, vitality, and good circulation, your immune system becomes your ultimate, most reliable shield. Those bad bugs, those viruses, those opportunistic infections, they don't stand a chance. And even if they do get past your outer defenses, your body has the strength, the energy, and the resources to push them right back out before they can cause real trouble. That's what we're aiming for 40, not just treating symptoms, but building a resilient, robust body from the ground up. Start small. Be patient with yourself. Your body will thank you genuinely, quietly, and over time. That's all for today, my friends. I hope this information was helpful and gave you some practical tools you can actually use. If you're dealing with any persistent health concerns, stomach issues, joint pain, or anything else, please don't try to figure it all out on your own. Schedule a visit with your primary care doctor. Get the proper tests done. Use this information as a conversation starter with your healthcare team. I'm here to help you understand the science, the traditional wisdom, and the practical options, but I am not here to replace your doctor's professional medical advice. Always consult your own physician before making any changes to your medications, your diet, or your supplement routine. If you found this helpful, drop a comment below and let me know if you're going to try any of these clove recipes or if you have your own favorite way to use cloves. I'd love to hear from you, and if you have questions, ask away, Subai. I read as many comments as I can. Take care of yourselves, stay warm, stay well, and I'll see you in the next one.